What happens when two of hip-hop's biggest bosses start questioning each other's money, success, and legacy in public? That's exactly what's happening right now. And this latest exchange between 50 Cent and Rick Ross may be one of the most explosive chapters in their nearly two-decade rivalry. It all started after Rick Ross appeared on a podcast and made a series of bold claims, suggesting that 50 Cent isn't as wealthy or as powerful as people think. He mocked 50's business empire, questioned what he actually owns, joked about his living situation, and even implied he would embarrass him publicly if given the chance. But if you know anything about 50 Cent, you already know he almost never lets a public shot go unanswered. Instead of staying quiet, 50 fired back in classic fashion, using sarcasm, social media, and brutal one-liners to attack Rick Ross' luxury lifestyle. He questioned whether Ross' massive Georgia estate is really a symbol of wealth, or just an expensive burden, even joking that Ross cuts his own grass to save money. Suddenly, what began as a few comments on a podcast turned into another viral battle that has fans picking sides all over social media. But this feud goes much deeper than insults. Behind every joke are years of diss tracks, lawsuits, business disputes, public humiliation, and personal attacks that have kept these two rap icons locked in one of hip-hop's longest-running rivalries. So why did Rick Ross decide to reignite the beef now? Did 50 Cent really expose something about Ross' lifestyle, or was Ross the one who landed the bigger punch? Stay with us, because we are breaking down every claim, every response, and the real story behind this latest war between two of hip-hop's biggest names. The real surprise wasn't that Rick Ross mentioned 50 Cent again. Fans have seen these two trade shots for years. The surprise was how quickly the conversation escalated and how personal it became. What should have been an ordinary podcast discussion suddenly transformed into one of the hottest topics in hip-hop, proving once again that when these two names appear in the same headline, the internet pays attention. Ross wasn't promoting a diss track. He wasn't releasing an album aimed at 50. Instead, he was sitting comfortably during a long-form interview when the subject of older rappers and longevity in the music business came up. As the discussion continued, 50 Cent's name entered the conversation, and from that moment, everything changed. Instead of avoiding the topic, Ross leaned into it. He made it crystal clear that there was still no friendship, no mutual respect, and certainly no desire to bury the hatchet. According to Ross, nothing had changed between them over the years. In his eyes, the rivalry was just as real today as it had been when it first exploded more than a decade ago. Then came the comments that instantly spread across social media. Ross questioned whether 50 Cent's image actually reflected his financial reality. He argued that people gave 50 credit for massive success without looking closely at what he truly owned. He suggested that many of the biggest projects associated with 50's name were controlled by other companies, and that the public had built an exaggerated picture of his empire. Those remarks immediately grabbed headlines because they targeted something that has always been central to 50 Cent's brand, his reputation as one of hip-hop's smartest businessmen. But Ross wasn't finished. He joked about 50's lifestyle, claimed he wasn't living the luxurious life many fans imagined, and even mocked the idea of 50's wealth compared to his own. At one point, he suggested that if 50 ever came around his property, there were jobs he could perform instead of standing beside him as an equal. The remarks were clearly designed to entertain the audience, but they also carried a message. Ross wanted people to question everything they believed about 50 Cent's financial success. Within minutes, clips from the interview began circulating across YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Fans immediately divided into two camps. One group argued that Ross had finally exposed uncomfortable questions about ownership, music rights, and celebrity wealth. They believed that flashy headlines often hide complicated business arrangements, and that Ross was simply forcing people to look deeper. The other side saw something completely different. To them, Rick Ross was simply doing what many critics have accused artists of doing for years, mentioning 50 Cent because his name guarantees attention. They pointed out that every time someone publicly criticizes 50, the interview instantly becomes news. Suddenly blogs start reposting clips, reaction channels create videos, and social media begins debating every sentence. That argument wasn't new. In fact, it's exactly what 50 himself has claimed for years. According to 50, whenever another rapper needs extra attention, his name somehow enters the conversation. He has repeatedly suggested that mentioning him creates instant publicity because audiences know there's always a chance he'll respond with something even more entertaining. And if history has taught fans anything, it's this. Ignoring criticism has never really been 50 Cent's style. Whether it's an interview, an Instagram post, or a podcast appearance, 50 has built a reputation for responding in ways that often become bigger stories than the original comments themselves. That's exactly why people began waiting almost immediately. Everyone wanted to know one thing. How long would it take before 50 Cent answered? It didn't take very long. Instead of writing a lengthy statement or conducting a serious interview, 50 responded the way many fans expected, through humor mixed with sharp criticism. Rather than directly arguing about net worth estimates, he shifted attention towards something equally symbolic: Rick Ross' famous Georgia estate. For years, Ross has proudly showcased the enormous property across social media. The mansion has become one of the biggest symbols of his luxury lifestyle, appearing in countless videos featuring exotic cars, business ventures, and lavish events. 50 chose that exact symbol as his target. He joked that maintaining such a massive property costs enormous amounts of money and suggested that appearances don't always reveal financial reality. He even mocked Ross for allegedly cutting his own grass, turning what could have been an ordinary observation into another viral punchline. The joke spread almost instantly. Memes appeared within hours. Fans reposted clips. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Once again, the rivalry had escaped the music world and become mainstream entertainment. What's fascinating about this feud is that neither artist simply insults the other. Instead, both men attack the image the other has spent years building. Rick Ross built his reputation around luxury, real estate, expensive cars, private jets, and larger-than-life success. 50 Cent built his around smart investments, business moves, television production, entrepreneurship, and financial intelligence. So when Ross questions 50's ownership, he isn't just criticizing his money. He's challenging his identity. Likewise, when 50 questions Ross' mansion and lifestyle, he isn't merely talking about real estate. He's attacking the very foundation of Ross' public image. That's why every exchange between them feels much bigger than ordinary trash talk. These aren't random insults. They are carefully aimed at the brands each man has spent decades creating. And that's exactly why fans remain fascinated after all these years. Most rap feuds eventually disappear. Artists move on. Business opportunities replace old rivalries. Collaborations happen. Peace is made. But this rivalry has followed a completely different path. Every few months, or sometimes every few years, all it takes is one interview, one Instagram post, or one sarcastic comment for everything to explode all over again. The latest exchange followed that exact pattern. Ross fired first. 50 answered. The internet reacted. And suddenly, an old rivalry felt brand new again. But what many younger fans may not realize is that this isn't simply a disagreement that started recently. The tension between these two men stretches back nearly 2 decades and includes diss records, lawsuits, business disputes, public trolling, accusations, and some of the most memorable exchanges hip-hop has ever seen. Understanding today's battle means going back to where everything allegedly began. Because long before podcast interviews, long before debates about net worth, long before luxury mansions and business empires became the focus. One encounter reportedly changed everything, and from that moment forward, 50 Cent and Rick Ross would become two of the fiercest rivals hip-hop has ever seen. One encounter reportedly changed everything, and from that moment forward, 50 Cent and Rick Ross would become two of the fiercest rivals hip-hop has ever seen. To understand why a simple podcast interview could reignite so much drama, you have to go back nearly 2 decades. This wasn't a rivalry that started because of one disrespectful comment or one diss record. According to both artists' public accounts over the years, the tension had been building since the late 2000s, when both men were among the biggest names in rap. At that time, 50 Cent was already one of hip-hop's most recognizable stars. His success extended far beyond music, and he had built a reputation as someone who never backed away from confrontation. Rick Ross, meanwhile, was rapidly becoming one of rap's biggest personalities, creating a larger-than-life image centered around luxury, expensive cars, and business ambition. Both artists projected confidence. Both believed they represented the definition of success. And neither one liked being challenged. According to past interviews discussed in the transcript, Ross has said that one of the earliest sparks happened around the 2008 BET Hip Hop Awards. He claimed he felt disrespected by the way 50 looked at him during the event. 50, however, later dismissed that version of events, saying he didn't even remember such an interaction. Whether either account is completely accurate or not, both men have acknowledged that the relationship never improved afterward. Then came 2009. Instead of letting things fade away, the rivalry exploded into public view. Rick Ross released Mafia Music, a record that included pointed references, aimed at 50 Cent, and touched on personal issues connected to his life. In hip-hop, diss records are nothing new. But this one crossed into deeply personal territory, immediately raising the stakes. Anyone who has followed 50 Cent's career knows one thing. He almost never lets a public attack go unanswered. Sure enough, his response arrived quickly. Rather than simply replying with another song, 50 launched one of the most memorable counterattacks of the era. He released Officer Ricky, a diss that focused not only on Ross music, but also on reports that Ross had previously worked as a corrections officer before becoming a rapper. That revelation became one of the biggest talking points in hip-hop media and shifted the debate away from lyrics toward credibility and public image. Almost overnight, the feud transformed. It was no longer about who had the better songs. It became a battle over authenticity. Supporters of Ross argued that his musical success spoke for itself and that his past employment didn't erase what he had achieved. Supporters of 50 believed the revelation exposed a contradiction between Ross' image and his real-life history. From that point forward, neither side seemed willing to step back. Every interview became another opportunity. Every social media post became another weapon. Every public appearance carried the possibility of another headline. As years passed, the rivalry expanded far beyond music. Instead of fading after an album cycle, as many rap feuds eventually do, it evolved into something much larger. Business, money, real estate, television, legal battles, social media. Everything became part of the competition. And that's one reason this feud has remained relevant for so long. Unlike many rivalries that rely only on diss tracks, this one followed both artists into nearly every area of their careers. As 50 Cent became increasingly successful in television and entertainment, fans began viewing him as more than just a rapper. His projects outside music helped reshape his public image into that of an entrepreneur and producer. Rick Ross built his brand differently. He leaned heavily into luxury. His mansion, his car collection, his business ventures, his public lifestyle. Every Instagram post reinforced the image of a man living like a billionaire. Those two completely different brands created a perfect formula for conflict. Whenever 50 questioned Ross, he usually attacked the luxury image. Whenever Ross criticized 50, he often questioned the ownership behind his success. That's exactly what happened again during the recent podcast appearance. Ross argued that many people assume 50 owns far more than he actually does. He questioned whether some of the projects most closely associated with 50 truly belong to him and suggested that ownership, not popularity, is what really matters in business. Whether those opinions are accurate or not, they were enough to restart a conversation that had never completely disappeared. Another reason this rivalry refuses to die is because both artists understand something many entertainers don't. Attention has value. Every clip goes viral. Every response generates headlines. Every headline creates millions of views. That doesn't necessarily mean every exchange is planned, but both men clearly understand how much public interest still exists whenever their names appear together. The latest comments proved that once again. Within hours of Ross' interview circulating online, reaction channels were breaking down every statement. Fans weren't simply debating who made the funniest joke. They were asking much bigger questions. Who really has the stronger business empire? Who owns more of their work? Who built the more successful career after music? Those questions have become just as important as record sales. Money has always carried enormous weight in hip-hop culture. Success isn't measured only by albums anymore. It's measured by investments, companies, ownership, property, television, streaming, brand power. That's why Ross' recent remarks attracted so much attention. He wasn't simply saying 50 wasn't making good music anymore. He was challenging the very foundation of 50's reputation as a businessman. Of course, longtime fans knew exactly what would happen next. 50 Cent would answer. Not because he always needs the last word, but because responding has become part of his public identity. For years, 50 has built a reputation for using humor instead of anger. Rather than delivering long emotional speeches, he often responds with sarcastic jokes that quickly spread across social media. That's exactly what happened again. Instead of carefully explaining financial records or debating ownership percentages, 50 focused on Rick Ross' lifestyle. He questioned whether Ross' enormous Georgia estate was really the symbol of wealth everyone believed it to be. He suggested that maintaining such a massive property costs enormous amounts of money, and joked that Ross was trying to save cash by cutting his own lawn. The comments instantly went viral because they transformed a serious financial debate into a series of jokes that people could easily share online. Ross, however, wasn't interested in backing down. Rather than apologizing or softening his position, he doubled down on his criticisms and continued challenging 50's public image. At that point, the internet realized something important. This wasn't going to end with one interview. It wasn't going to end with one Instagram post. And it certainly wasn't going to end with one sarcastic joke. Instead, the latest exchange had reopened nearly 20 years of unfinished business. But while fans focused on the newest insults, another chapter of this rivalry was waiting beneath the surface, one involving lawsuits, bankruptcy headlines, financial disclosures, and courtroom battles that took the feud far beyond rap music. Because once lawyers became involved, the rivalry stopped being just entertainment. It became personal in ways few hip-hop feuds ever have. Because once lawyers became involved, the rivalry stopped being just entertainment. It became personal in ways very few hip-hop feuds ever have. As the years passed, the battle between 50 Cent and Rick Ross moved far beyond diss records and interviews. Instead of simply exchanging insults through music, both men found themselves connected to lawsuits, financial headlines, and public debates that kept their names in the spotlight. Every new legal development seemed to give each side fresh material to use against the other. One of the biggest turning points came in 2015, when 50 Cent filed for bankruptcy protection following major legal judgments and financial obligations. The filing instantly became one of the biggest entertainment stories of the year. Critics questioned how someone known for displaying stacks of cash online could suddenly be involved in bankruptcy proceedings, while supporters argued that bankruptcy filings can sometimes be part of broader legal and financial strategies rather than a simple reflection of someone's overall wealth. Regardless of how people interpreted it, the headlines gave Rick Ross another talking point that would continue resurfacing for years. During his recent interview, Ross once again referenced that period. He suggested that people often focus on impressive net worth estimates without discussing the financial setbacks that also became public. According to Ross, those earlier court proceedings shaped the way he viewed 50 Cent's finances, and he used that history to support his current criticism. But the legal story didn't end there. The rivalry wasn't one-sided. Around the same era, 50 Cent also pursued legal action connected to Ross and projects associated with him. What had once been a battle fought through microphones had expanded into courtrooms, attorneys, filings, and legal arguments. Instead of simply competing for chart positions, both artists were now battling over business matters, intellectual property, and public perception. For fans, the feud became even more fascinating because every court case created new headlines. Every headline created new interviews. Every interview created new responses. And every response kept the rivalry alive. Years later, those old legal battles were still influencing the conversation. Ross argued that information revealed during those disputes changed his opinion about 50's financial situation. Whether fans agreed with Ross or not, his comments immediately reignited debates across social media, where people began comparing celebrity wealth estimates, business ownership, and investment portfolios. Of course, internet debates rarely stay focused on facts alone. Within hours, thousands of fans began choosing sides. Some argued that questioning 50 Cent's wealth made little sense considering his successful television work, production deals, touring career, and business ventures. Others believed Ross had raised legitimate questions about ownership, royalties, and long-term financial control. The discussion spread across hip-hop blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, and social media pages, proving once again that this rivalry still commands enormous public attention. Meanwhile, 50 Cent responded the way fans expected. Instead of publishing financial documents or trying to prove every claim wrong, he leaned into humor. He returned to mocking Ross Georgia estate, suggesting that such a massive property could become more of a financial burden than a symbol of success. He questioned whether maintaining the estate truly reflected wealth or simply created enormous expenses. It was another example of how 50 often transforms criticism into comedy, allowing his audience to laugh while still delivering a pointed response. Ross wasn't silent either. He fired back with jokes of his own, even suggesting that 50 could use his property for future television productions. Rather than letting the conversation fade, both men continued feeding the public's fascination with their rivalry. As the exchange continued, the feud expanded beyond money. Ross also questioned 50's loyalty within the music industry, referencing his public interactions during major rap conflicts, and suggesting that loyalty mattered just as much as financial success. These comments shifted the discussion away from business and into reputation, another area where both artists have spent years carefully building their public images. By this point, it had become obvious why this rivalry has survived for so many years. Neither artist is simply protecting music sales. They are protecting their legacy. For Rick Ross, the luxury lifestyle, real estate empire, expensive cars, and business image are central to his identity. For 50 Cent, entrepreneurship, television success, smart investments, and financial intelligence have become just as important as his music career. Every insult challenges those identities. Every joke targets years of work. And that's why neither side seems willing to ignore the other. Looking back over nearly 2 decades, this feud has included almost everything imaginable. Award show tension, diss records, personal accusations, public interviews, business disputes, legal battles, social media trolling, financial debates. Even after all these years, a single podcast appearance was enough to send the internet into another frenzy. That alone says something remarkable about both artists. Very few rivalries in hip-hop history have remained relevant for this long. Most eventually fade. People move on. Collaborations happen. Old enemies become business partners. But with 50 Cent and Rick Ross, every new headline seems capable of reopening old wounds. And perhaps that's why fans remain so invested. The rivalry has become larger than music itself. It's now about image, influence, business, power, and ultimately, legacy. Whether Rick Ross genuinely believes his criticisms or simply enjoys provoking one of rap's biggest personalities. Whether 50 Cent responds because he feels challenged or because he understands the value of viral attention. Only they truly know. What is certain is that every exchange between them generates millions of views, endless discussions, and fresh headlines across the entertainment world. So who actually won this latest round? That depends on who you ask. Some fans believe Ross landed the first punch by questioning 50's business empire. Others argue that 50's sarcastic responses once again shifted public attention back in his favor. Perhaps the biggest winner, however, is the audience. Because after nearly 20 years, this rivalry continues to deliver exactly what fans expect: headline-making moments, unforgettable one-liners, and endless debate. And judging by everything we've seen so far, this probably won't be the last chapter. The next interview, the next social media post, or the next viral clip could easily start the whole cycle all over again. So now it's your turn. Whose side are you on? Do you think Rick Ross made valid points? Or did 50 Cent once again prove why he's one of hip-hop's greatest masters of the comeback? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest stories from the world of hip-hop.